Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. See, we've got about 6 or 7 people here already, which is awesome. Very cool. Thank you so much for being part of this. This is definitely totally unique. First time I've tried anything like this. I'm sure all y'all, if you're here already, most likely already know who I am, but in case you don't, my name is Dr. Matt Dorsey. I am the CHOQ Chief Scientific Officer, and I am a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. Boy, this is going to be different. Feast your eyes upon this totally chaotic smorgasbord of topics that we're going to start with here in just a moment. Let me just go over a few things real quick. We will at some point give away some CHOQ products for sure, as we always do. It's going to be a 90-minute program, so feel free to tune in, tune out whenever. I will at some point randomly give some prizes away. Also, I'm not going to be answering questions too much in the middle of the presentation. If one catches my eye that's super on topic, then I might go ahead and go for it. Also, I will promise you, one thing I will not promise is that this is going to be a perfectly organized, totally linear sequential experience. What I will promise you is that it's going to be absolutely fascinating, and I guarantee every single person here is going to learn at least one new thing. Most of you guys are going to have your minds blown multiple times, though, if you stick with me for the full 90 minutes. There's so much to cover here. And I'd like to also let you guys know a little bit about me. Before I got my master's and then doctorate in Chinese medicine, I actually studied psychology and philosophy. So I did a Bachelor of Science in psychology with a minor in philosophy. Psychology and Carl Jung and sort of the psycho-spiritual exploration of the human experience is what got me into the healing arts in the first place. And so if a lot of this seems deeply psychological, our exploration of things like artificial intelligence, the singularity, technology in general, right, what it means for humanity, how to stay human, obviously. If it seems like it's a bit more psychological than you expected, then, well, you've been warned. I think it's important to bring it home to a foundation of psychology and philosophy, because that is one of the main things that is missing in science. One of the reasons that science tends to go off the rails is because scientists oftentimes tend to be philosophically incompetent. That is to say that there's lots of scientists figuring out the how of how to accomplish something. But the reason technology goes off the rails, like we're watching it go off the rails right now, is because they don't ask why. Why are we actually doing this? The deeper reasons, the deeper motivations, right? So we have to take a psychological lens to really understand where this is all going and what it could possibly mean. And also to admit how much we still don't know about what the hell is going on. So, yeah, hope that somewhat makes sense to you guys. I'm just kind of, again, informing you as to my background and the reason that this is going to get a little bit philosophical and psychological. I think that's really critical. But also, there's a lot of technical stuff to talk about. I mean, look at this. This is crazy, right? So what I did right here is I started with just this in the middle, right? Main topic here for the beginning: artificial general intelligence, also known as strong AI. And then I just started to throw other important topics on here, right? And I allowed it to get completely chaotic on purpose because I think it's a perfect representation of where we are at right now. If you look around the world, it seems a bit like a mess. It seems like there are all of these crazy different trajectories of technology, changes in economics, changes in self-definition, right? Humans seem to be changing who we are. All these things are radically changing, right? And it feels almost like trying to predict the future is completely futile, because it's just, it's like every year you go out, 2040, 2050, 2060, it gets harder and harder to figure out to even with any accuracy whatsoever what's going to happen. There's all of these different multipliers of human technological progress and just general multipliers of change. And it's a reason that many of us might be very freaked out about the future. And if there's one thing I don't want to do with this presentation, it's to scare people and make you feel more fearful. I'm going to be real about some of the issues here and not necessarily sugarcoat them. But at the same time, I do want to let you guys know that I'm a very deeply optimistic person. Optimism is deep within my DNA. And I look at troubling things all the time, like some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, and I maintain my optimism. So I invite you guys to do the same. So whether you're watching this right now live, or you're watching it later, or you're watching it 10 or 20 years from now, after some of this stuff has already come to pass, whenever you're watching it, whoever you are, whatever your opinion is, philosophical, religious, scientific background you have, just know that the intent behind this is to inform, but not with fear, to not generate more fear, and to generate a sense of hope and optimism, and to open one's mind. Let's start with this: Icarus's folly. Every science fiction horror type movie you've ever seen starts with this general idea of hubris, right? Of scientists who have flown too close to the sun, right? Scientists who are like, we created this thing, we wanted to feel like gods, right? We made this thing that's so powerful, it made us feel like we must be powerful to create something so powerful, right? So it made us feel like gods. And we got so drunk on that feeling of feeling like gods, of creating this immensely powerful technology or whatever it is. We got high on it. We got so high. We flew so close. We got so high, literally high, right? That we forgot that if you fly high enough, you get burned and you sink to the ground and you die. So there's this thread of hubris, right? That so you have to ask yourself with each of these technologies, and anytime you see one of these scientists or one of these computer scientists or technologists, techno-solutionists, these types of folks, have to ask yourself, how much of this is hubris, right? But it's also good to ask yourself that too, because hubris takes a lot of forms. If I told you that I knew exactly what was going to happen and that I could predict the future, then you should probably stop listening to me, right? If I told you, hey, there's a good chance this might happen, but nobody has any idea, and I'm admitting to you how little I know, that's a good thing, right? It's good to admit how little we know. And of course, there's that whole Zen mind, beginner's mind. I will tell you that increasingly, I feel very stupid listening to all of these amazing, interesting people, these scientists and philosophers, and all of these brilliant people who you can find on YouTube, and you can read their books. And I feel stupid on a regular basis. And it's kind of painful to feel stupid. It's not a fun feeling. At the same time, that is the Zen mind, beginner's mind thing. That's the phenomenon, right? Of like realizing just how little you know. And so knowing just enough, to know how little you know, is good. It's a great jumping off point. So if you know very, very little about the situation of artificial intelligence, technology, all this stuff right here, the singularity, transhumanism, if you know very little about that, that's totally fine. If you know a lot about it, that's awesome. And, maybe a couple of you guys could even school me. Who knows, right? I will also tell you a quick disclaimer before we get going is I am not a Luddite. So I don't know if that's a term I threw on here or not. Let's just make this even more chaotic here. Luddite. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with that term, but Luddite is essentially a term used for somebody who resists technology, who is anti-technology, right? I am not that. I mean, I am ensconced in technology just like everyone else is, but I think I maybe have a tendency to be a bit more cautious than most. Obviously, I study natural medicine, right? I am a Taoist by default because I practice Taoist medicine. Chinese medicine is a several thousand-year-old tradition based in, understanding the natural rhythms of the earth, understanding things like qi, right? These concepts that are totally bogus and metaphysical to scientific materialists, right? So I have a healthy appreciation of the natural and to some extent think that it is important to maintain that distinction between natural and artificial, but there are different perspectives on that. And anyway, so, all right, where to begin here? Where to begin? I would like to begin by reading you guys. This is a blog article I wrote a while back on the CHOQ website that I'm sure you guys, many of you are familiar with. I'm just going to read you the beginning. It's called "Don't Be a Biohacker Because You Are Not a Machine." So here we go. You are not a machine. You are a living organism with purpose and feeling and irrational fuzziness. You are autopoietic, meaning that you renew and regenerate yourself. You are sovereign in your subjectivity, an ecosystem unto yourself who's dynamically, intrinsically interconnected with the universal macrocosm of life and mind. Who and what you are can never be reduced to the collisions of subatomic particles and the forces that govern them because at scale, you transcend the boundaries and knowledge of physics as we know it. But why do we even need to be reminded of all this in the first place? It's a sign of the times. So, yeah. Why is it so good to be reminded that we're human, right? This is my favorite shirt. This just says in Japanese, "I am human," I believe, according to what I've been told, which ironically enough, somebody had to use Google Translate to figure that out. So they had to use artificial intelligence to figure out what this means, "I am human." Why does it feel good to be reminded that we're human? Well, we're to some extent getting trapped in our own creation, right? I like that phrase earlier, ensconced in technology. We are increasingly in this ocean of human artificial abstraction that has become the water that is invisible through its ubiquity, right? So water, fish don't know what water is because it's just the thing that they're in, right? It's basically empty space to them. It's just the medium that they're in, right? So they don't know what they're in. Increasingly, technology becomes invisible to us because it just becomes our new way of life. And so let's start with this here. Artificial general intelligence. What we are currently building right now, the idea is that, so we have artificial narrow intelligence in many ways, which is what happens when you use AI to produce something that can do specific things. And then at a certain point, we're going to have artificial general intelligence, which is also known as strong AI. This right here is basically the concept of we have a machine that is on par with the human in terms of what it can learn and the generalizability of its functions. So in other words, it can do anything a human can do, right? There's also the concept of, later on down the line, of artificial superintelligence, right? Now, there's literally people out there who believe that there's going to be an artificial intelligence god in the future. There's even some folks out there who have created a religion based on some future AI god. I don't know their names. I didn't jot those down. But if a lot of this stuff starts to take on mythological and religious, if you start to see the mythological and religious connotations here, then that's no coincidence. So, but yes, it is fascinating to me that there's already a religion based on this. And of course, Elon Musk, controversial figure. Some people like him, some people hate him. I will say, I haven't made up my mind. I don't think he's necessarily evil per se. I don't want to oversimplify him. But he is at least a bit more realistic when it comes to this type of stuff than a lot of these techno-solutionists and people like Ray Kurzweil, who's responsible for the singularity concept that we can get to in a second, for those of y'all who might not know what singularity is. So artificial general intelligence, though. So basically, people like Elon Musk are saying, look, if you're the kind of person who actually is talking about AI gods, you should not be permitted at all to develop artificial intelligence. You just shouldn't be. Elon Musk literally, and in defense of Elon Musk, again, he's a human. He's not perfect. He's got his issues. In defense of Elon Musk, though, I will say he has said things like, for example, like I said, right, if you are talking about AI gods, you shouldn't be making AI. He's also said that it's significantly more dangerous than nuclear technology, than nuclear power and nuclear weapons. Much, much, much more dangerous. So he is one of the people who's at least thinking about how do we try to regulate this and make sure it doesn't go completely off the rails. The only thing that scared me when I was younger, when I was a little kid, other monsters that were biological in nature never scared me when I was a kid. Zombies didn't scare me. Random weird creatures, Loch Ness monster type creatures didn't scare me. Vampires didn't scare me. Werewolves didn't scare me. None of that scared me. I thought that was all dumb. What terrified me was the Terminator. I had, yes, the T-100, as Sam says. I had dreams, I had nightmares about the Terminator as a child after I saw Terminator 1 when I was pretty young. Saw Terminator fairly young. And then later on, Terminator 2 came out and became my favorite movie of all time. Terminator 2 is still to this day one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's not just my favorite action movie, because yes, Terminator 2 is an action movie, but it's so much more than that. It's a brilliant, brilliant drama. It's a philosophical thinking inducing movie. It's brilliant on so many levels, right? I think that people who write these sorts of, dystopian books and movies, they are tapped into very important things. And it's not to say that we should be scaring ourselves 24/7, but it is to say that it's important that we have these cautionary tales, the same way that we have Orwell's 1984, the same way that we have, Brave New World by Huxley, right? We have these cautionary tales. And they capture potential future timelines that could unfold. And ideally, they're not just scaring us for the sake of scaring us. They're showing us what may unfold, and they're highlighting areas that could be exploited in a negative way, right? Possible exploits, and hopefully helping us to design a future that doesn't go that direction. And I do believe that Elon Musk seems to be at least trying to do that. Trying to. Is he succeeding? I don't know. Again, not a perfect person. But when I compare him to somebody like a Ray Kurzweil, you guys know about Ray Kurzweil seems to believe that this singularity is absolutely inevitable. That's kind of his term as far as I know. He projects that this will happen somewhere around 2045. This is supposed to be the point at which AGI gets so strong. And then we also have technologies like the neural lace. Neural lace is a term which is like Neuralink, which is what Musk is developing right now, which is the brain-machine interface. So brain-machine interfaces basically get really advanced. AGI gets really advanced. We have merging of machines and humans, right? And then we have the singularity point, right, where basically humans and machines are completely merged, right? And one of the things driving this is the fact that AI is so advanced that in order to compete with it, we have to merge with it, right? So there are people like Kurzweil who truly believe that this is going to be some kind of, this is going to be humanity's savior, really, right? Other people argue that it's extraordinarily naive, and it's a form of escapism. And when you listen to a lot of these folks, I'm going to play a video for you guys right now. And I want to give you an example of how a techno-solutionist thinks and just how ignorant some of these people can come off. And I don't mean to call this gentleman specifically ignorant. His name is Jason Sosa. I'm sure he's a brilliant human. But I happened to find his TEDx talk. And I'm going to show you just really fast. This is him talking about transhumanism, the coming transhuman era. I'm just going to play this for you really quickly here. So what people like Jason Sosa believe is that the way that children are completely glued to their phones is evidence that humanity is naturally going in that direction, right? And that it's really interesting what he did with the term natural, right? You noticed he was saying that that it's increasingly perceived by the younger generations as unnatural to not see technology as an extension of you. And just, interesting way of inverting reality to some extent. But hey, can you fault him? I mean, this is his world, this is his world. And, but if this gentleman were here right now, I would ask him, what do you think about things like, for example, let's look down here. What is neuroweaponology? That's interesting. What is asymmetric warfare? What is fourth generation warfare? Limbic hijacking. What does game theory have to do with any of this, right? Yeah, I don't know. Are these terms familiar to you guys? Is this sounding interesting? And are we getting into some really hairy conspiracy type territories here now? So if we're going to merge with machines, are we at a level of maturity, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, as a species, to be able to do this in a way where it's not just going to make people easier to manipulate, and it's not going to be yet another way of us just basically upping the ante when it comes to things like psychological warfare. Fourth generation warfare is another term. It's a term that encompasses things like Psy-ops, psychological warfare, cognitive warfare, Psy-ops, all that sort of stuff right here, right? Neuroweaponology, this is a real term. And we're actually going to watch a video from a neuroscientist named Dr. James Giordano, who deals with things like neuroweaponology and neuroethics. Very interesting gentleman, right? So once we have these implants in our brains, whether they are, like a matrix jack or whatever, obviously this doesn't make any physiological sense because, that's silly. That's just for, sci-fi movies. But anyway, wherever the implant is or whether they're nanobots, whatever, if we have a direct interface with the brain, at that point, then will various state actors and non-state actors inevitably take advantage of the ability to influence us and how we think on an extremely, extremely profound level, right? So, this is the neuroethics, very, very important, right? So let's watch really fast. Let's watch Dr. James Giordano here. This is him talking about neuroweaponology. I like how he starts off with the phrase, no sci-fi here, folks, just dealing with fact.
No sci-fi here, folks, only facts. Then we get into the real form of a weapon. When we're talking about a real form of a weapon, remember, this is a means of contending against another in each and all of these dimensions. Assess and predict their escalations to violence so that we may be able to intervene, perhaps mitigate those, mitigate said aggression directly or indirectly, incur certain burdens of morbidity that makes them less likely to engage in combative or violent activity, and in some cases, induce mortality. These are all viable operational definitions of a weapon, and can neuroscience and technology be employed for these? Each and all. One of the areas where we're looking to refine the capabilities of neuroscience and technology is something referred to as non-lethal or less lethal weapons. And while one might think that the ethical argument strongly supports these directions, here too, there is in fact a strong discourse that pushes back against any potential military warfare applications of the brain sciences that I think you need to understand.
Listen to this part, very important.
The reason I bring that up is that this can do two things. Number one, it creates a posture where the neurosciences cannot and should not ever be used for these types of operations. Please understand, my feeling on that is, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing?
Wouldn't it be?
If we could in fact look ourselves in our eye as humanity and say we shall never employ science and technology for those means that may be destructive against others,
Listen to this
irrespective
next part
of whether or not those individuals are aligned with our ideology and our beliefs. Yes, that would be. The reality of the situation poses itself as something quite differently, however. And the problem we need to face is that certain prohibitions, if not frank proscriptions against using brain science in these potential ways, even defensively, may create an opportunistic window for others to be able to then pursue these approaches more vigilantly and more aggressively.
There we go. There it is. There it is. So this is how game theory and warfare works. This is the mentality is, if we don't do this, if we don't create this particular kind of very advanced weapon, then the other guys might. So we have to. And literally, they're all thinking that. They're all thinking that. Game theory. Yeah, right? Because if it's like, so, if the question is, your opponent has the means, just like you do, to develop this particular kind of weapon based on, say, for example, using certain kinds of neural lace type technologies to influence your enemy, or other kinds of, all sorts of stuff, right? Anything involving this or this. If your enemy has the means to do that, then they probably will. And that means that you have to as well, right? So on that same topic, let's see if I can find this one here. Daniel Schmachtenberger is a name you guys should definitely know. One of the most brilliant thinkers of our time, I believe, on so many different topics. And this is him talking about AI drone weapons. And on the exact same topic here, check this out.
And it's easy to just say, hey, yeah, there was some wackadoodle who was saying that there was going to be some risk, but there's always some wackadoodle saying there's going to be risk about every new tech. And if we really listened to all of them, we'd have no progress. That's the story, right? It's a bullshit story. Could we? Now there's a collective coordination issue, because it is fair to say, so like, let's take AI weapons right now, specifically automated drone weapons. There is an arms race happening on automated drone weapons. And I think every general and military strategist knows that all of our chance of dying from AI weapons goes up. Their kids, everybody's, as we progress in that technology. It's a bad technology. It shouldn't exist. We should create an international moratorium that says nobody builds AI drone weapons. That we don't want automated weapons with high intelligence out there. But we can't make that moratorium, because if one country doesn't agree, if one non-country, some non-state actor doesn't agree that has the technology, or let's say everybody agrees, how do we know they're not lying and developing it as an underground black project?
Exactly.
So either we don't even make the agreement, or we make the agreement knowing we're going to lie, defect in a black project, spy on their black project, and try to lie to their spies. Of course, spying on us.
There we have it. There we have it. So again, this is what game theory suggests. In a certain sense, because you can never know 100% whether your enemy is doing this, no matter how well you're spying, right? They might be hiding it from you. So you have to do it now. In fact, you have to do it yesterday, right? Because you better damn get a better version of this killer drone technology, of this neural lace information extraction technology, of this, cognitive warfare influencing the hearts and minds of your enemies technology. You better do all these things because if you don't, your enemy will, and they'll get the strategic advantage. So Schmachtenberger is great. He talks a lot about game theory and getting away from a game theoretic model. Game theoretic models are based on zero sum, right? Are you guys familiar with that concept of a zero sum game, right? It basically means I win, you lose, right? You know, there's a limited amount of stuff, and it's about everybody having to get as much stuff as possible. I take your stuff, you have less, I have more. Zero sum, right? All games that have clear, distinct winners and losers are subject to game theory and subject to zero sum type thinking. What Schmachtenberger and a lot of the other brilliant thinkers out there who talk about things like sense making and things of that ilk is that at this point on the planet, we can't be thinking about we can't use game theoretic models anymore. We have to think as one species, right? We have to think of in terms of a cooperative model so that we don't destroy the entire planet, destroy the entire ecosystem, right? We have to think, so game theory, the whole binary game theory, I win, you lose model, this is ultimately a suicidal model at this point in human evolution. So we have to get away from this. So what's interesting about that though? So right now, AI is evolving based on its ability to win games. So are you guys familiar with AlphaGo and AlphaZero? You know, so there have been in the development of artificial intelligence, there have been these different critical milestones, right? There was a critical milestone when Deep Blue beat Kasparov or whatever it was, or some other chess champions, right? I can't remember whoever it was, right? And so they were like, okay, chess is, that's a big deal. But Go, the Chinese game of Go, there are infinitely more possibilities with Go. It's a much more chaotic type system or type game with too many possibilities. It's way different, less linear than chess. It's going to be really hard to beat, to build an AI to beat someone at Go. And then there were people who predicted it would happen at a certain time. Well, they actually built an AI that built the Grand Master of Go like a couple of years ahead of schedule, right? So the best Go player in the world is now a machine, right? And then they built something called AlphaZero. So they built a more general AI, right, called AlphaZero, which then beat AlphaGo at Go. And AlphaZero, increasingly, these are not AIs built to do one thing. These are not AIs that are built just to play Go. They're built to literally learn any game that exists and to beat any human out there at that game. That's what's happening, right? But notice the philosophy here, right? It's about how can we build AI to win more shit, right? It's based on this game theoretic model of reality and how we win and other people lose. So again, all of the superpowers, they're all thinking, and then of course all the companies are all thinking like, we need to build a better model, a better predictive model of how things will go. Just whatever model, you know, that applies to that company or that country, right? Whether it's a model of warfare or a model of, you know, stocks or whatever, right? To beat the other model, you know. One of the areas we're going to get into, this is where it gets really interesting, is building predictive models that predict human behavior. Whose predictive model is going to win, right? I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but if anyone has seen Westworld, if you really read between the lines and you truly study Westworld like a scholar, think about it deeply like a psychologist or a philosopher, it has some amazing things to say, truly profound things to say, especially in the third season, about this idea of building predictive models of human behavior and also cramming people by altering them into a model of AI predictability. So yeah, getting pretty out there, I know. All right, so speaking of Elon Musk, let's see, I think I've got him talking about right here. Let's check this out really fast. Here we go. Mr. Musk.
It's pretty clear we could almost eliminate car accidents with automation.
With each search, we train it to be better. Sometimes we type in a search and it tells us the answer before you've finished asking the question. Who is the president of Kazakhstan? And it'll just tell you. You don't have to go to the Kazakhstan national website to find out. Didn't used to be able to do that. A neural net is something very close to a simulation of how the brain works. It's very probabilistic, but with contextual relevance. The average person, they don't see killer robots going down the streets. They're like, what are you talking about? Man, we want to make sure that we don't have killer robots going down the street. Once they're going down the street, it is too late. Google acquired DeepMind several years ago. DeepMind operates as a semi-independent subsidiary of Google. The thing that makes DeepMind unique is that DeepMind is absolutely focused on creating digital superintelligence, an AI that is vastly smarter than any human on Earth and ultimately smarter than all humans on Earth combined. The DeepMind system can win at any game. It can already beat all the original Atari games. It is superhuman. It plays the games at super speed in less than a minute. DeepMind's AI has administrator-level access to Google's servers to optimize energy usage at the data centers. However, this could be an unintentional Trojan horse. DeepMind has to have complete control of the data centers, so with a little software update, that AI could take complete control of the whole Google system, which means they can do anything. They can look at all your data, they can do anything. We're rapidly headed towards digital superintelligence that far exceeds any human. I think it's very obvious.
So yes, he thinks we are headed toward not just artificial general intelligence, but artificial superintelligence, basically. Yeah. Again, Elon Musk, disclaimer, complicated human. Do I agree with everything he says? No. Do I know all of his intentions? No, I don't know him personally, even though I hear he does hang out in Austin sometimes with his buddy Joe Rogan. Seems like everybody's coming to Austin now. But at least he's talking about stuff like this, yeah. So, all right, let's zoom out for a second. So again, just to before we do that, let's go back and just review. So we have machines learning how to play games and how to beat all other humans. So at this point, with regard to various games, the only game in town that's interesting is, can my artificial intelligence beat your artificial intelligence, right? So now they're just pitting one artificial intelligence Go player against another artificial intelligence Go player, right? So yeah, game theory. Again, let's zoom out philosophically. This is about I win, you lose. Again, people like Daniel Schmachtenberger would say that is exactly the kind of thinking that will get us destroyed as a species. It's not a good way to think. We need to be thinking in terms of a more cooperative model, not a model where it's just basically every single country, every single company, every single person vying for getting as many resources as they can as the whole ship sinks, right? Yes. So, but yes, computer programs are obsessed with this. They're like, look how good our AI is at winning games. It can beat everybody. Isn't that great? Well, yeah, it's impressive, but what are we going to do with that technology? So now let's get into some of these other interesting territories down here. So another thing that Schmachtenberger likes to talk about is limbic hijacking, right? Your limbic system, this links to your fight or flight response, to very, very strong emotions, and emotions like shock, outrage, things like that, right? And increasingly so, Facebook has been accused of taking advantage of content that actually does this. Limbic hijacking means basically our consciousness is taken over by something that shocks us. So if you're a conservative and you get on Facebook, they're going to show you something horrible that liberals are doing. If you're a liberal, they're going to show you something horrible that Trump just did, right? They're going to show you something that is going to shock you, right? Because this is what actually gets you disengaged from your higher thinking centers, right? So what does that look like? Well, this is another term you should know, asymmetric warfare. And we're talking specifically about asymmetric cognitive warfare. Asymmetric meaning you're playing a game against an artificial intelligence like AlphaGo or AlphaZero, and you don't know it when you're online. When you're on one of these social media sites, in a sense, you actually are playing a game, and it's asymmetric because you're playing against something that you can never, ever beat, in a sense, right? And the game is, how do we extract as much of your attention and as much of your data as possible? Knowing that your attention and your data is money, right? It's not just money, though. It's also what is being used to build psychological profiles, not just of you, but of humanity in general, to teach this thing. So let that sink in for a second, right? You get onto Google, you get onto Facebook, you are engaging in a form of psychological asymmetric warfare. Now, obviously, I'm putting it in a bit of an extreme way, but we could think of it this way. And the game is, how do we keep you on this platform and extract as much information from you as possible, and then feed it into this hive mind that is learning how to become more human, but not just learning how to become more human and learning how to think. It's learning about how to predict your behavior. And we're going to get more into that a little bit later, predicting human behavior. Again, I strongly suggest people watch Westworld. I know there is a whole lot of, it's very intense. There's a lot of nudity and violence in it. And at first I thought, oh, this is just, it's a cool show or whatever. And then it got deeper and deeper and deeper. And I really do think that there's a very interesting message in it. Yeah. So again, to go to things like neuroethics, how do we make sure that anything that has the ability to affect the brain, any kind of technology that's affecting the brain, how do we make sure this is being done ethically? I don't know if we really can, because I think that honestly, there's going to be the stuff that, the legislatures that are introduced that affect the visible, but not the invisible elements. And the invisible elements will probably always be there. I'm sure that most of you guys realize that the majority of military technology that exists, we have no idea it's there. And quite possible that a significant amount of it may even violate international law. Who knows, right? So very hard to stop that train. I'm going to zoom out even more now and go to something a bit more philosophical. In my article, You Are Not a Machine, or Don't Be a Biohacker Because You're Not a Machine, I talk about Descartes. And I quote from a book. And this is, I just want to show you the philosophical model that we're coming from, that is influencing so much of how we think in the modern era, modernity, right? Modernity. Let's talk about Descartes for a second. Descartes. So back in the 1600s, humans had become obsessed with their own machines. They had started to make things like clocks, looms, pumps, and there's this idea. Let me just show you a quick preview. There's this idea of the imago Dei, the God image. Humans, when we started to get the ability to make complex machines, it made us feel like God. And we decided that we wanted to pretend that God was a machine maker because we're machine makers. We wanted to feel more like we're God, right? To get high on that feeling. And so then we started to pretend that nature was a machine. This is called mechanomorphism. Anthropomorphism is when you project human qualities onto a robot or a machine. Mechanomorphism is when you project machine-like qualities onto a living organism, such as a person or a plant or an animal. So this is from the book Science Set Free by biologist Rupert Sheldrake, great guy. He says Descartes took the mechanical metaphor much further than Kepler or Galileo, who also did this, by extending it into the realm of life. He was fascinated by the sophisticated machinery of his age, such as clocks, looms, and pumps. Just as Kepler projected the image of man-made machinery onto the cosmos, Descartes projected it onto animals. They too were like clockwork. And then I continue in the article. Descartes' belief in the mechanic concept of nature was so unassailable that he was fully confident that doing unspeakable things to animals was no big deal, operating under the assumption that they were essentially machines and therefore had no feelings. And operate he did. Descartes was a biohacker in the most brutal, literal sense of the word, as he was known to cut up living dogs without anesthesia, live vivisection, just for the sake of studying their anatomy. Sheldrake goes on to say, Descartes' doctrine seems to justify cruelty to animals, including vivisection, and it was said that the test of his followers was whether or not they would kick their dogs. So this is the birth of dog-kicking scientific materialism. And I'm not saying that every person like Kurzweil or every person who's into biohacking or any of this stuff is, cruel to animals, right? But I just want to say, we have inherited this perspective and we don't know it. We've inherited this scientific materialist paradigmatic way of thinking about reality, and we are projecting mechanical qualities onto nature. It's very important to realize that we are not machines. You are not a machine. I am not a machine. We are not machines. We might behave in some ways like machines, and in fact, that is our shadow. That is our shadow. Our shadow is that when we are unconscious, we behave more like machines and less like humans. Right? So let's get into some interesting stuff here. Let's go more psychological. All right. So let's go archetypal for a moment. Read this. Creation usurps creator. Does this sound like perhaps a certain biblical story? And I'm not just saying this as a feature of Christianity, right? Of Lucifer trying to overthrow God. This is something you find in many different mythologies, a universal thing. It's not just a Christian thing. Prometheus, for example, and a lot of these techno-solutionists, they're very Promethean, actually. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, or from Zeus specifically, I believe, right? And was obviously punished for it and supposedly never regretted it, right? So he's kind of a hero, right? But this idea of usurping the creator, right? What's really interesting about what happened during this period in the 1600s is that you had scientists fighting the church, right? And of course, Catholic Church was not very nice. And, it's good that somebody came along and probably said, hey, stop lying to us and torturing us and killing us. Probably a good thing, right? But the idea is that they wanted to actually take over as the new clergy. I think Francis Bacon is one of them. There was this movement among scientists back then in the 17th century to become the new clergy, to usurp the church. They wanted to be the new authority. And when you look at some of the more philosophically regressive scientific materialists out there, I won't pick on too many of them, but the ones who I just kind of see them and I'm like, ugh, gross, certain physicists, certain, prominent atheists, it's clear they have a chip on their shoulder and they have inherited this generational, this weird vibe where they want to become the new religion, but they don't admit that they're a religion. And let's come full circle though. There's literally people out there creating religions based on artificial intelligence. But I joke around that Christianity is like an atheism machine, an atheism producing factory, in the sense that conservative parents tend to produce, liberal children. Liberal parents can produce conservative children, only in the sense that the new generation does the opposite of what the previous generation did to fight against it, right? But yeah, this is a universal story. The creation usurps the creator. So we have the story of Prometheus, right? interestingly enough, Prometheus is the god of forethought and foresight. So when we're in the realm of futurism, this is a very Promethean archetypal kind of idea right here. Interestingly enough, fire is the element. If you had to say out of the four elements, the classical 4 elements, not the 5-element Chinese system, but the classical 4 elements, if you had to pick an element, saying which element is, electricity, electronics, right? Obviously, electronics would be the fire element, right? Because you can literally start fire with electricity. You can start fire with electrons, right? Electrons carry enough energy to start fire, right? So we are actually playing with fire. This is a very Promethean archetypal situation we're talking about. But again, so Prometheus, dual meaning here, god of forethought and foresight. So really essentially the god of the archetype, not just God, but the archetype, a pattern of human behavior and of human thought, of foresight and forethought, and essentially of futurism. But at the same time, we have the whole fire thing, right? But yes, so when we talk about all these stories like Terminator, The Matrix, anything else along those lines, we create something, humans, we play God, we create something extraordinarily powerful that's so powerful that it can create new versions of itself, right? So if we get to the point where we have actually developed artificial general intelligence and we've empowered it to create more robots, then we have played God, right? And then at that point, our creation could actually usurp us. And so that's what all these movies are about. They're about this universal human archetypal fear that this will happen, And in a sense, though, you could go a bit deeper and you could say, what is the true meaning of this story of the creation usurping the creator? And again, I'm not speaking from a specific religious tradition. I'm just speaking in a general philosophical archetypal fashion here. What does this mean? What is the deeper meaning of this, right? I'm actually not going to answer that right now. I'm just going to let you guys ponder that. Just ask yourself, just pause for a minute and say, what is the deepest meaning of this? Creation usurping the creator. How could this apply on an individual level? Something you create, right? What does this really mean? Just something to think about. And maybe we'll come back to that. Now, shadow, again, getting very psychological here, very important though. Shadow is all the things that we don't know about ourselves, right? And this can actually be good things too. If you have the capability of being an enlightened master, that's technically part of your shadow too. That's what they call in psychology the gold part of the shadow. Take a sip of water here. But common parlance, putatively, what we understand as shadow typically is the darker parts. Obviously, it's a dark kind of sounding word. It's in black here. Shadow meaning the dark parts of the psyche, the parts we don't like to admit are there, right? And a lot of these really overly optimistic Kurzweil type folks, they don't strike me as the most psychologically savvy people who maybe have really looked into their own minds. And maybe that's unfair of me. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing and I'm painting with too broad of a brush. They don't strike me as the kind of folks who really are asking themselves deeper Jungian type questions like, what is coming through our collective shadow when we create these creations? Could it be that our own unresolved tendencies toward game theoretic, psychological warfare, manipulation, weaponology, zero-sum type thinking, could it be that that part of our shadow, those unresolved tendencies, could be reflected in our creation? And that then our creation could take on these elements, and then that could completely screw us. Possibly so, right? So the major question is, at what point do we get to the point where we have processed enough of this collective shadow where we can actually create? Because it's naive to say that simply trying to pass laws against weaponizing, especially on an international level, passing laws against weaponizing drones, for example, weaponizing AI, is going to actually do the trick. You can't just legislate away deep human traits, and even if some countries don't do it, like we saw from Schmachtenberger, etc., somebody's going to do it. And so that very thinking that somebody's going to do it is going to say, well, everybody's probably going to have to do it, right? Because we don't want to be non-competitive. By the way, incidentally, something to know about drones is that, in a sense, you have to, at some point, if your drones want to be competitive, you have to actually give them the ability to kill without human permission. And that has to do with speed. So if a drone is in combat, right, and let's say that drone is up against a vehicle that has real humans in it, right, and you have a rule that says your drone has to ask you permission to first to fire on this tank or whatever, that's very, very slow. That requires the signal to be transmitted all the way to a person, that person to have to think and then to give the signal back. That could be enough time where in that period of time, that tank has already targeted your drone and destroyed it. So even things like automated killing, there's probably going to be at some point this argument of, well, it's just too slow to get human permission. I'm sorry. But that's a whole other thing. Just wanted to throw that out there. And again, just saying this is the kind of thinking that gets us into a Terminator type scenario. And I'm not saying this to say that that's actually where we're headed. Again, I'm very optimistic. I really am. But here's the thing. We have to process enough of the human collective shadow, and we have to evolve spiritually, psychologically, emotionally to be mature enough where we can handle this kind of power, where we can actually produce things ethically, I didn't hit on neo-tribalism, but let's just say that it's a sign of the times as well. Right now, people are scared. There's a lot of divide and conquer going on. And, we're tribing up. And that's not, that also goes into this whole game theory, us versus them mentality. I do have an article on division called The Divisive Virus on the CHOQ blog website, which you guys might find interesting. Also, by the way, I did earlier at the very beginning, and I'll post this again. I'm going to pin this message at the top. I actually made a playlist of different YouTube videos, some of the ones that I've shown, some of the ones that I haven't and may not get a chance to tonight. And if you want to check that playlist out, it's pinned at the top now. It's got some really cool videos that are on that are all relevant to what I'm talking about. Really interesting stuff. So, all right, let's go to the next one. Wow, that first hour went by fast, tell you what. All right, so this is a fun graph I made. So this also goes back to Westworld, and this is what we're literally seeing this happen before our very eyes right now. So I had to come up with a very awkward term, machine likeness, how machine-like something is, how machine-like something seems, right? And then that's the y-axis. This is the x-axis. So theoretically, over time, what might happen is, as humans actually might be becoming more machine-like. Is this perhaps ringing true for anyone? Are you witnessing people acting, humans, this green line here, are you witnessing perhaps people behaving more like machines? I'm curious. Is that something you're watching? And clearly we're watching robots become less like machines and more like humans, right? As AI progresses, as technology moves forward, we're watching robots or artificial intelligence, whatever you want to call it, we're watching them seem less like machines and more human-like. So my question is, what happens when we get here? This is this convergence point at which they have become indistinguishable. Now, one could argue that humans don't have to actually become more machine-like for this to happen, that eventually the robots would just get down here anyway. But I do believe, and again, highly, highly, highly recommend Westworld. Stick with it. Watch it through season 3. And once you get to season 3, though, study it like it's a textbook. One of the most brilliant things that I've seen on this topic ever. But, watch it with a discerning eye. Take notes. But we are witnessing, I think right now we're here. And I don't mean to be cynical. I don't mean to terrify people, but I really do believe we're watching. I mean, do you know people who behave a lot more like technology zombies than perhaps they did before the pandemic started? I did a mini blog on the Chalk website called How Big Tech is Leveraging the Pandemic. And actually, it was a summary of another person's article by the same name. Anyway, so and I'm not saying even this, who knows if this was intentional? I don't know. All I know is that we're staying indoors more, because of the whole pandemic thing, right? And what are we doing? We're filtering all of our communication through technology. We're ordering all of our food through technology, right? We are not really necessarily interacting with each other. We're not going outside nearly as often. A lot of people are, even though the virus doesn't transmit outside at all, yet people scared to even go outside, right? And the point is not to talk about the virus, but just talk about what's happening with humans now being even more separated from each other and from nature and getting more ensconced in technology, right? Getting to the point right now, we are witnessing the birth of, if you guys remember all the way back to an hour ago when I showed that Jason Sosa video, the expression on his kid's face, it was lost on him what his kid looked like, but there was a screen here and his kid was staring at the screen like this. Just entranced, right? We're seeing technology zombification happening right now. So we are witnessing this convergence, right? If you're watching this right now, you're probably not necessarily one of them, but at the same time, we are all susceptible to this. And obviously technology is amazing. It's, me staring into screens for long periods is the way that I got a lot of this information that I'm relaying to you right now, right? You're staring into a screen right now. I'm staring into a camera lens and multiple screens. I have 3 different screens in front of me. So yeah, of course, totally hypocritical, right? But at the same time, this is the fire element. We need to be very, very careful with it. And it has the ability to dehumanize us massively dehumanize us. And predictive modeling is very important, and it's a huge part of this. And again, Westworld articulates this beautifully. Westworld 3, season 3 is essentially a documentary, is what I'm saying. It really is. It really is. So, all right. I even mentioned it down here, Westworld. And in Westworld, they even have, it might be hard for you guys to read, but this says Westworld. It's kind of small. This has loops. They talked about that. Hopefully you can read this. This is big. Predictive modeling of human behavior, right? So within the game theoretic context of everyone, of all the major state and non-state actors creating artificial intelligences with the purpose of predicting the future, they necessarily must predict how humans will behave. Now, on a very, very small microcosmic level, this means predicting what you're going to buy, like predicting what, like Facebook, for example, predicting based on which posts, how you react to such certain posts, which posts you view, what you share. It can predict, if it's like, I voted for this person, then it's going to like, okay, you want to buy this kind of t-shirt, whatever it is, right? That's a very, very small example. But it's all about modeling, predictive modeling of human behavior. What we see, and I won't spoil Westworld for you, but what we see increasingly the round peg being shaped such that it can fit into the square hole, or the square peg being reshaped so it can fit into the round hole, right? We see that we have to force humans to become less human and more predictable so they fit the predictive AI model. So you necessarily, to fit into this model created by computers, you have to become less human and more predictable. So at a certain point, what we actually have is we have machines programming humans. We have the creation usurping the creator, right? Machines figure out how to program us. They figure out how to do Psy-ops on us. They figure out how to do, basically how to manipulate human behavior, human emotion, human thought. And I would argue that the more invasive our technology is, the closer we get to this Kurzweilian singularity, the point at which we have literal direct digital brain interfaces, neural laces, the easier it's going to be for this to happen. Yeah. But think about that philosophy, that concept of we have to do this to stay competitive, right? Like we learned earlier about, like we heard earlier from Schmachtenberger about the drones, right? Right? Like, well, they're going to do it, so we have to do it too. We got to win the game. That's the exact same kind of flawed thinking that you hear from people like Kurzweil. They're saying we have to merge with machines in order to stay competitive. Otherwise, the machines will win. So we have to basically blend. So just recognize that there's a pervasive and highly flawed way of thinking about things. But yeah, machines programming humans, the created usurping the creator in a sense. Yeah. I want to show you something from Douglas Rushkoff, somebody who you guys should all know. This is great. It's called Why Upgrading Humanity is a Transhumanist Myth. And it also hits on the fact that the transhumanists and the technologists, they are under this illusion that we know more about how the brain works than the neuroscientists. Neuroscientists are a bit more honest about the limitations of this kind of stuff.
I think we still know so little about what it means to be human that the confidence with which we think we can upload ourselves to silicon or recreate ourselves with algorithms is shocking to me. The only ones out there who think they know what human consciousness is are computer engineers. If you talk to actual brain researchers and neuroscientists, they say we're nowhere close. We don't even know for sure what goes on in a single square centimeter of soil. We're still trying to teach agriculture companies that the soil is alive, that it's not just dirt that you can put chemicals on. It's a living matrix. If we don't even know what a single centimeter of soil is, how do we know what the human brain is? We don't. We don't know what the source of consciousness is. We don't know where we come from. We don't even know if there's a meaning to this universe or not. Yet we think that we can make a simulation that's as valid as this. Every simulation we make misses something. Think about the different.
Every simulation we make misses something. By the way, really fast, I don't want to interrupt this because I'm kind of on a roll. I'm just going to tell you, here's how we're doing the giveaway. We're just doing one giveaway today, and it's for 3 of any CHOQ products. And it is going to be a trivia question. It's kind of an unfair trivia question, but we're just going to see who gets it. You guys answer in the background. I'll come back to it. The trivia question for 3 of any CHOQ product you want is, who is my favorite 20th century philosopher? So I've never said this before. I'm just going to let you guys guess. And feel free, just guess as many as you want. Just throw it out there in the chat. I'm not going to pay attention to it right now. I'll come back to it in a few minutes. But in the chat right now, if you'd like, you can do multiple guesses if you want. I don't even care. Who is my favorite 20th century philosopher. And I won't even pay attention. I'll just come back to it in a bit. All right. I'm going to play a little bit more of this.
Between being in a jazz club and listening to a great CD, there's a difference, and some of those differences we understand and some of them we don't. So when I see people rushing off to upload consciousness to a chip, it feels more like escape from humanity than it is a journey forward. And I get it. Life is scary. I mean, women, real life women are scary. The people are scary. The moisture is scary. Death is scary. Babies are scary. Other people who don't speak the same language or have the same customs, they're scary. All sorts of stuff is scary. And I understand the idea of this kind of having a sim city perfected simulation that I can go into and not have to worry about all that stuff I don't know, where everything is discrete, everything is a yes, no, this, that, all the choices have been made. There's a certain attractiveness to that, but that's dead. It's not alive. There's no wonder. There's no awe. There's nothing strange and liminal and ambiguous about
Nothing
it.
strange and liminal and ambiguous. What does that sound like? Well, there's one thing I want to come back to I didn't mention here. Every dystopian movie you've ever seen shares one thing in common. And no one's gotten the answer yet, by the way. Absence of sacred space. I'm not going to show it, but if you go to that pinned comment with the playlist I made just for this Stay Human episode, you will find there's a video, and it's by a guy who goes by the name Like Stories of Old. Anyway, it goes into sacred space. It's called The Archetype of the Magician is the name of the video. Sacred space, right? What is sacred? What feels sacred? Yeah. So we have this sense in this this weird, overly technological, separated from nature and each other. L. Ron Hubbard, great one, Senior Prepper. That's hilarious. That's going to be a no. But thanks for playing the game. By the way, I can already tell I'm going to go longer than 90 minutes. So, hopefully you guys will stick around. If not, either way, I'm just going to keep going because this is great. I'm just having a lot of fun. And I'm liking the whole non-linear chaotic element to it because, what could be more human than that, right? Just free association, random access memory, LOL. So absence of sacred space, right? The more machine-like we become, he's talking about this sort of wanting to make everything safe and perfect and sim city, getting away from the weirdness and the danger. Also right now we have this sort of like prioritization of safety over freedom. That right there, one could think of as, it's a possibility that might be related to this, right? Wanting to control things, control everything. That stuff is scary. It really is. I'm going to show you now. There's a guy named Jaron Lanier. He's going to quote in this video from the original, the founder of cybernetics, a guy named Norbert Wiener. Check this out. So this guy he's a man after my own heart. He's actually Abigail. Oh, wait a second. Hold on here. Did Abigail get it? Alan Watts is the correct answer. Abigail, you are our winner. Everybody give Abigail a big round of applause. Abigail, you just won 3 of any CHOQ product. Great job. Yes. Mr. Alan Watts. Nobody like him. And I think, Abigail, perhaps you realized that I'm an acupuncturist, which makes me a Taoist, which makes me an appreciator of Eastern philosophy. And Alan Watts was truly a master. But he had a way with words, a way of explaining highly complex concepts from religion and philosophy and mythology in a way that was just absolutely divine. One of the most brilliant people of that century. And so, yes, Abigail, great job. You know the drill. Email chalk@chalk.com. I will make sure that they know that today is a special one with three prizes. Yeah, Abigail, great job. Anyway, and I'm going to hit you guys with an Alan Watts quote in just a little bit, actually. So stay tuned for that. I want to actually give you guys, let's see. Let's give you one more on game theory and disinformation from the Schmachtenberger. So this is getting back into the whole psychological warfare, game theory, manipulation thing, and this is highly relevant to what we see going on right now. Right now, we're in the realm very much so of information warfare. That's what we see happening online, all the censorship, the control of information, disinformation campaigns, very, very relevant. Schmachtenberger, check out this video from the playlist I posted that's pinned. This is great. Great stuff.
So if I'm in a competitive game and I have some information about reality, the reality of the playing field that I'm in, then that information can be a source of strategic competitive advantage against whoever I'm competing against. And so I have an incentive to withhold that information from other players and maybe even disinform the other players. So we see this in actual games. This is bluffing in poker. This is fake left and go right in soccer or football. But we also would see this in keeping the knowledge to ourselves of where the water is or where the gold is from another tribe or another kingdom or whatever, and maybe even trying to throw them off the scent trail with, an intentional leaked fake treasure map that has them go in the wrong direction so they don't accidentally discover what we discovered, things like that. So within a rivalrous context where information is strategic competitive advantage, there is an incentive to disinform. And as we get increasing information technology, which is media technology and computational technology and statistics and all these things, we really have exponential information processing, but applied to disinformation, the incentive to disinform, we have exponential disinformation capacity, which means the ability to customize inflammatory fake news, propaganda, narrative warfare to specific demographics and all the way down to specific types of people that are the types that are most likely for that person to believe, be upset by, affect their actions. So we see, with social media platforms like Facebook, the capacity to be able to target the things that are going to be the stickiest for an individual. And the stickiest often is by appealing to limbic hijacks of what is scariest to them or hits addiction buttons the most or creates a sense of in-group, out-group dynamic or things like that. So when you think about having a society that has an incentive to both withhold information and to disinform, and you think about a huge number of different agents who all have increasing disinformation capacities, and you also think about the radical asymmetry between an individual just trying to make sense of the world and a huge platform like Facebook or Google or a company that is doing, split test optimized marketing, you have a asymmetric information warfare of the largest powers in the world with agendas that are not the same as the agenda of the individual for themselves being put forth on, radically powerful information technology platforms. So you look at the world today, and whether it's climate change or whether it's what the extent of the damage at Fukushima is or what the actual tactical capabilities of North Korea are or how long we actually have with coral die-off or most any of the things that are the most critical issues in the world, what goal other countries or what effect other countries had in influencing US elections, no one really knows the most important things clearly to be able to inform good choice making, even about how we survive as a species. And
yeah, so that's the Schmachtenberger. Again, if you guys are not familiar, highly recommended. Definitely required required watching. Check that video out. All right, so, oh boy, where are we now? This guy, Jaron Lanier, who I showed, who was the larger gentleman with the dreadlocks, who was talking about, well, the one who had the TED Talk, right? Who was quoting from Norbert Wiener, right? About in the future, what might happen if, we all have these, devices that connect us and can, predict our behavior. He wrote a book actually called "You Are Not a Gadget." So very similar to, my article, "You Are Not a Machine." Really, really interesting thinker. He's one of the founders, one of the guys who created virtual reality. He is, an old school programmer. He's a tech guy, but he's very, very critical of what's happening right now, talking about the way that things have altered us and how we behave, acting through. So there's these anonymization effects he talks about, for example, when we're anonymous online, how that tends to completely change our behavior. I'm totally guilty of this. I've done this a million times. Perhaps you guys have too, right? So right now, for example, if you're in the chat, right, and whether you're using your real name or not, you're still fairly anonymous, but especially if you're not using a real name, you just say whatever, right? And you're not going to say the same things as if you were standing right next to me, right? Let's say you hated what I was saying, right? But you happen to be right here in an audience, in a live audience. You would phrase that in a kinder, gentler way, most likely than you would if you were an anonymous person on the chat and you were just like, fuck you, you're full of shit, whatever, right? So this is an artifact of how we communicate over the internet. When we're anonymized, we do totally different stuff. We behave very artificially on social media. We turn ourselves into a commodity that we're trying to sell, right? The idea of branding, of having a brand, right? I've got a brand, you've got a brand. It's like, I'm a Mitsubishi, you're a Toyota, she's a BMW, this guy over here is a Rolls Royce. We're all brands, right? We're trying to sell ourselves, right? And then I have virtual and augmented reality, right? Obviously, you want to put reality in quotes right here, right? The capacity to use this for evil is, extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Doesn't mean that there aren't good, beautiful, amazing uses too. Playing a really cool virtual reality video game could be lots of fun. You can use VR to create 3D art. I have a friend who does that, who uses Tilt Brush to make art that can be 3D printed in 3 dimensions using virtual reality. Really cool. So I'm not saying it's all bad, but come on though. Really? Augmented reality where you have AR glasses? Imagine you're dating somebody and, maybe you don't like how their eyes look. You just change their eyes. Just make sure you're wearing your glasses every time you get together, right? And they're gonna look hotter when you've got your augmented reality, not your drunk goggles, but your AR goggles on, right? Shit could get really, really weird. Really, really weird, especially when you think about, so the United States is in one place, but think about where China is. I don't have any videos spooled up here on China and their whole weird social credit thing, but that's another thing to contemplate. So stuff's getting real weird, but this is one of the main most important things is, again, predictive modeling of human behavior. In Westworld, what we see competing models of how to predict and analyze human behavior. And again, that goes back to big theme here, this role reversal, right, of the child telling the parent what to do, right, of the machines programming humans. So this next part's a little dark, but this is also the way through is to ask ourselves, this whole page is just all about shadow. How are we like automatons? How are humans how are we like machines? And if we can answer this honestly, we can become more human and less machine-like, right? So mind viruses do exist. Trauma, generational programs, malignant belief systems, hypnosis, or the scarier term, mind control, whatever you want to call it, right? These are ways in which humans already act like machines, right? In a sense, we are programmable. We use one thing I'm just going to write this down. This is really important. And this is something I think that is a big, big takeaway. Try to avoid using the mental and emotional manipulation strategy of shame. If there's one thing that we're seeing way, way too much of in all media, online, the news, whatever, it's shame. This is one of the ways that we program other humans, right? We say, like, if you don't see the pandemic the way that I see it, if you don't see the V word the way that I see it, if you don't see fill in the blank with wedge issue, whatever it is, the way that I see it, you should feel ashamed of yourself. This is holding someone emotionally hostage. This is basically telling somebody, I want you to feel bad right now because of what you believe. And I'm going to try to force my belief onto you using this. So cancel culture, public shaming, censorship gets into this too, manipulation, different ways of trying to actually force your programs on someone else against their will, to coerce other people, right? This is another part of our shadow. This is our machine shadow. This is the way that we lose touch with our humanity and become more machine-like. So everything on this page has everything to do with this graph right here. So when I'm talking about humans and robots, consciousness converging here in the center, one of the things that's actually driving this right here, humans in the green again, one of the things that's driving this is shame. Is us attempting to force our belief systems on other people and telling them, if you don't believe this, you are bad, and I want you to feel bad, right? That's a weapon. That is, so no matter what your goal is, right? Perhaps you believe the ends justify the means. So when we're doing Psy-ops on another country, the ends justify the means of manipulating the perception of reality of the enemy, because ultimately we don't have to kill as many of them, So perhaps it's a step in the right direction. It's better to shame someone and force them to believe what you believe than it is to punch that person in the face, perhaps, But just remember, this is all shadow. This is all machine type stuff. This is unconscious machine thought loop, being in a prison essentially of beliefs and identification with beliefs, right? And I'm not saying I'm immune to this whatsoever, but this is part of the whole meta programming thing, right? The idea of, and again, saying that humans can be programmed is unfortunately it's a machine metaphor, and we are not machines. But it is important to say, how are we machine-like? So we are absolutely not machines. We are living organisms, right? Which is my central thesis here, one of them. But very important to know, these are the ways we can behave more like machines. And the more that we do stuff like this, the more we're likely we are to be easily programmed by the machines that were made by the people who wants to manipulate and control us for various reasons, right? And whether that group who wants to manipulate, control us is either local from deeply embedded deep state elements of our own government, according to some people, or whether it's another country trying to influence us. Some people believe Russia, the KGB has been, they were doing this for a very, very long time, doing all sorts of weird psychological warfare on Americans, perhaps, I don't know. But either way, this stuff is very, very real. And the more that we come to terms with the machine-like elements of our shadow, the way that we behave unconsciously, the way that we act as vectors for mind viruses, right? The more human we can actually be, If you can value love and non-judgment and cooperation over being right, that gives you some human points, right? If you can resist the temptation to shame people online because they don't believe what you believe, you know, if you can resist the temptation to do this whole us versus them in group, out group dynamic, right? Where you're like, this person's not in the in group because they don't believe this. I'm in the in group over here, you know, that just creates more unconsciousness, more machine-like groupthink. Groupthink itself, groupthink enhances our AI predictability. The more susceptible to groupthink, to just going along with whatever our in-group goes with and not questioning it, the more predictable we become as a species. So predictability is intimately intertwined with all this stuff, you know? So yeah, if you want to resist the ability to be predicted by AI, if you want to resist becoming an automaton or more of an automaton, then, you know, doing the shadow work to see where there are areas where you behave like a robot, like a machine, that's a big part of it. And it really is as simple as repeatedly just choosing love and cooperation over needing to be right. That part of you that needs to be right is actually the same part that has the ability to act as a vector for mind viruses. Mind viruses are very real. Very, very real. Just like computer viruses. And this is another one of those metaphors that relies on thinking of humans as a machine, but in this case, it is relevant. There are mind viruses. There are psychotoxins. There are psychic viruses. And online, we're seeing it's a perfect way to propagate these mind viruses, you know. Generational programs, of course, we have passed down from parent to child. They don't really belong to anybody. Anyway, this is something that's definitely food for thought. Now let's get into some solutions here. And I feel like I'm going to spend more time on this in a subsequent episode. I think this episode is going to focus a little bit more on diagnosing the problem, right? Which is a necessary first step. But here's some stuff to take into account, some things that might help you reclaim your humanity a little bit, to get you unplugged. We'll call this the unplugging strategies page. Notice how I wrote airplane mode 3 times. Can't emphasize this enough. There's the EMF aspect of, you know, not having the EMFs from your phone when you're on airplane mode, especially when you're sleeping, very important. But then there's the psychological quality, right? Where if you're going on a hike, wouldn't it be nice to have a little bit of time when you're not available to the hive mind, when information isn't coming in and out of your pocket at light speed, you know? It's good to go on airplane mode sometimes, even if it's just for 20 minutes while you're camping. Consider airplane mode. Consider it the literal aspect of it in terms of limiting EMFs, but also consider the psychological aspect of it, of just temporarily unplugging from the hive mind, from the network, just for a little bit, right? Antioxidants, obviously, I work for a supplements company. Virtually all of our supplements have antioxidants in them. Very, very important. Glutathione is the most important out of all of them. We do know that electromagnetic frequencies drive up free radicals in the body. So EMFs, living in an EMF soup, constantly electrosmog, we need more antioxidants than we would otherwise. Earthing acts as an antioxidant and helps act to protect us against EMFs and reconnects us with a lot more than just the electrical signals coming from the Earth. We know that the Earth has free electrons in it, and because it does have a negative charge, the Earth. These electrons do go into our body. This is a very real thing that can be measured with equipment. This is not a woo-woo thing. This is just literal physics here. These electrons go into your body, and they actually do quench free radicals. So they act as an antioxidant. But there's probably a lot more going on with earthing than we know. So I won't get into all of that, but I do have a CHOQ article on that, actually. But yeah, go to the CHOQ website. I won't link right here, but go to the CHOQ website. Check out the earthing blog. I also have a blog on meditation. Meditation, if you can combine these all together, meditation plus earthing plus airplane mode. Oh, and of course, let's not forget sun. So I like to sometimes, take my shirt off, stand barefoot on the ground, meditate while I'm on airplane mode. That's a nice little reset. Even just 20 minutes of that is great. Great. If you're the kind of person who hasn't been outside in a little while, please get outside, even if it's just for 20 minutes. Resist the temptation to stay inside all the time. Consider doing more books than videos. Change your ratio. Look at your media diet here. But yeah, so for example, if you're just only watching videos all the time, obviously this video doesn't count, LOL. But consider doing more books. Consider doing something a little bit lower tech. Maybe even read a real book, such as Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. But yeah, maybe even consider reading a physical real book at some point, right? Or a Kindle or an e-ink type device is essentially just like looking at a book. So something that is not an OLED or an LCD, which gives you a break from screens. We could do, we could talk ad nauseum about why staring into screens is not good. It can cause problems with your eyes, physical eye problems, but it can also dysregulate your hormones, your circadian rhythm, all sorts of stuff. So more books, fewer videos, more e-ink or real paper, less OLED or LCD screens. Look at your media diet too. So a lot of us are consuming the junk food, the equivalent of junk food for the mind. If you are getting on Netflix and binging some stupid reality show constantly, or if you are getting on Facebook and just going from outrage post to outrage post, or just vomiting your emotions on, through that, sure, we all do that to some extent. It's not a matter of binary yes or no, but how much are you doing it? The same way of like with any other habit, how much do you drink? How much do you eat cheeseburgers and fries? It's not about you can't do it at all, or whatever. It's about how much are you doing this. So media diet, take a good long look at your media diet. What kinds of media are you consuming? Are they really educating you? Are you truly learning information that gives you a better idea of the state of the world? Are you really educating yourself, or are you taking in only junk food for the mind? So that's also a really big one right there. Obviously, there's other things that I didn't put on this list. I think most of us, if you're watching this, you probably already know how important a healthy diet is and things like exercise. And those are kind of uninteresting and boring, but they're critical, obviously. Eating food that's not laced with poison, all that's just kind of no duh. So I figured, what's the point in putting it on there? All right, now, okay, getting toward the end here. So yeah, this one's dedicated to my friend Senior Prepper. Put this in here. That's one of her favorite sayings here. This is one of the most important things you can do to stay human. And of course, because we're human, it's not like we can do this all the time, because you're going to have some shitty days that just suck. But, just remembering to be kind. There's that quote, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. Especially right now with the state of the world being as totally batshit crazy as it is. It's important to remember that, do what you can to be kind. Reject game theory. Game theory, again, go back to some of the work from Daniel Schmachtenberger and some other folks who he likes to chat with. Game theory says, I have to optimize for me or for my tribe, perhaps, right? It's a zero-sum game. Let's teach the computers to optimize for us, right? Let's figure out how to outsmart other people, right? So if that sounds like the thinking of a sociopath or a narcissist, it is, right? So be kind, basically, people right now, especially, people are really struggling. And if you're struggling, that's okay. You know, everybody, it's a tough time for everybody. And it's also a time when we are really, really all about this information combat online, trying to convince people of that, you know, it's narrative warfare is one term used for it. Narrative warfare. It's a form of warfare. It's like we're going to basically try to do everything we can to get you to see things the way that we see them, right? Not a very kind way of interacting with people. And I have fallen victim to this pattern of thought plenty of times online. So not immune to it whatsoever. I'm learning just like everyone else. There is a great video you guys will like on the playlist, the Stay Human Resources playlist that's pinned in the chat. That's also from Like Stories of Old. And it has to do, it talks about like, it's something like what humans are like when disaster hits or whatever. And it's a great, inspiring video. In a lot of movies, and it's popular for people to say, oh, when the shit hits the fan, people become monsters, right? And it's all about us versus them. The actual reality of the situation is that most of the time when disaster hits, humans help each other. They do great things for each other. They really do. So just important to know that. We really are innately good. Perhaps there are certain factions that want to make us think that we're not, but I believe we truly are. But yeah, this right here, very important. Remember, being a human, being on team human, as Douglas Rushkoff calls it, very, very important. And part of being on team human is that it's more important to value the other person for innately who they are and what they are as a human than it is to try to enforce your version of reality on them and push it on them violently. Things like, just to go back to a second to diagnosing the problem, but stuff like, notice how this is not a very kind way to operate, shaming people. But how commonplace is it these days to use shame as a way of trying to get people to believe what you believe? This is not a good tactic. This is a very, very bad tactic. So whatever political party you're a part of, whatever nationality, religion, whatever language you speak, whoever you are, try to not turn into somebody who in a very machine-like, predictable way uses shame to prop yourself up, make yourself feel like you're better than other people, and try to enforce your narrative, your version of reality, your model of reality onto other people. Not good. It's not good. And it's not good because it just ultimately in the day, it doesn't feel very good, And again, I'm not going to say that I'm not going to maybe just go out and do it next week. I might, I'm not perfect. But yeah, this is an important one, and hopefully we'll build robots that are kind too, Venture into sacred space, whatever this means to you. If you're a religious person and you go to church, that's probably your sacred space. If you do psychotherapy, perhaps when you're with your therapist, that's your sacred space. Or if you have a partner, and your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, and you have a sacred space you go to where you tell each other everything. If you're an adventurer and you're a rock climber, or if you're a psychonaut, and you do your breathing techniques or your psilocybin mushrooms or whatever it is that you do, perhaps that's your sacred space, whatever your sacred space is. Because, this is the place where we reconnect with a deeper part of ourselves that is not machine-like and not artificial. So I'm going to, on that note, I'm going to end here with a quote from my favorite philosopher, Alan Watts. All right, here we go. So one should think about this funny thing of technology considered as artificiality in the light of the realization that there really is nothing artificial. You might say that the distinction of the artificial from the natural is a very artificial distinction. That the constructs of human beings are really no more unnatural than bees' nests and birds' nests, and constructs of animal and insect and constructs of animal and insect beings. They're extensions of ourselves. Yeah, What do you guys think about that? Is that ridiculous? Is that legit? I don't know. What do you think? Let's see if we can let's hear it directly from Mr. Watts. See if I can pull this up here. If it wants to work, if it doesn't get retrograded here. Oh, perhaps not. So, yeah. Of course, he goes on in that same lecture, and I can link to it here in a second. He goes on in that same lecture to talk about, the loss of privacy and how weird that could be in technology. And, it's not like he's saying that it's all dandy, because he's a brilliant guy. But, at the end of the day, is there a such thing as artificial? I guess I would argue that it's less about is something natural or artificial. That might not be the most important distinction to make. The most important distinction is something adaptive or maladaptive? Is something actually creating a future in which all life can flourish or not? That might be the most important thing, right? So, of course, I'm inclined to say that the natural, reconnecting with the natural is essential. But yeah, just some food for thought there. So let's go back to this main first page one more time. Been almost 2 hours. Thanks for sticking with me. I don't know how many of you guys started and are still here, but if so, you get a cookie, a digital cookie, an e-cookie. There's a lot here. If you want to continue this, check out the playlist that I made. That is the Stay Human Resources playlist. It's pinned in a comment right at the very top. Take a screenshot of this, pause and look at this. Just ask yourself, how much of this stuff do I not know about, and how much should I know about, We live in very interesting times. There's that Chinese curse proverb, right? Very interesting times. So once again, I am extremely optimistic. I think we're going to make it through this. I could maybe call myself an apocalyptimist. Things probably are going to get pretty hairy here at some point, but we're undergoing a collective birthing process right now, and I think we're kind of crowning. Something new is being born, but it's a very messy, very painful, very weird process. And yeah, but if you do share this video, also let people know there is permission to hope, to be optimistic. Humans are really amazing, and a lot of us are very, very confused and misguided. Yes. But ultimately, I think things are going to work out. I really do. We're going to do more of these in the future, and we'll get more into specific topics for sure. And obviously, of course, I do my daily Monday through Friday, live with the CHOQTOR, which is usually around 5 or 6 o'clock Central. Next week, I'll be in Las Vegas for the Supply Side West, which is a kind of a supplements expo. So I might be doing more sporadic videos for next week, but I really appreciate you guys staying with us. Looking forward to the next one already. Hopefully we'll do another one of these in a few weeks or something. Yeah, please share this video, subscribe to the channel if you can. Let everybody know we're doing good things. And yeah, I will see you guys around. Very, very honored to have you all here. So hope you guys have an excellent evening. See if I can find the button underneath all this. Yeah. Oh yeah, and of course, stay human.